Okay, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. I would like to thank Tetrarchs, especially for partnering with us for Digital Lunch. We're very excited to team up to present a really fantastic speaker, Marieke van Erp, and I will give over the introduction to Anna, who will introduce our guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. So our great speaker today is a language technology and semantic web expert engaged in interdisciplinary research. She holds a PhD in computational linguistics from Tilburg University and has worked on many international interdisciplinary projects. Since 2017, she has been leading the Digital Humanities Research Lab at the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences Humanities Cluster. She is one of the founders and scientific directors of the Cultural AI Lab, a collaboration between 8 research and cultural heritage institutions in the Netherlands, aimed at the study, design, and development of socio-technological AI systems that are aware of the subtle and subjective complexity of human culture. In January 2023, she was awarded an ER3 Consolidator project that will investigate how language and semantic web technologies can improve the creation of knowledge graphs supporting humanities research. It's a great pleasure to welcome you, Marieke. Over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and also thank you so much for having me. So I will tell you about the Europa project, which has ended formally. At least the funding has ended, but as you will see, bits of it will still live on. And that's really all about smell. And we're really trying to, we're not the first ones who are investigating smell from a historical perspective and from a cultural perspective. But this project was one of the first that really took it into this big data space and this computational space together with historians, museologists, and other disciplines. So this was an EU project, so that also means it was distributed. We had partners in Germany, Slovenia, Italy, France, and the UK. And the Royal Academy in the Netherlands, we were coordinating it, as well as doing parts of the research. My role in the project was project manager, as well as helping with the language technology, which was led by Fondazione Bruno Kessler in Italy, and semantic web, so organizing the information about smell, which was led by Eurocom in France. And really what we wanted to do in this project was develop AI techniques to identify references to smells in texts and images, and basically create smell search for these collections that could then be used by the historians to create olfactory narratives. We also wanted to really promote olfactory heritage, and by showing that there's actually a lot more in archives than was previously known, we also took this to policymakers and to UNESCO and said, look, you need to do something with this. Of course, these are processes that take a long time, but that is also still an ongoing conversation. And really also show that this has value. Smell has value. So part of the project was also putting smells into museums and other kinds of events, and also asking people, well, what do you think of this? Would you pay extra for smells in the future? Because of course it is an extra thing that you would put on top of many exhibitions or other events. So that's really very briefly sort of the administrative stuff about it. But I really want to talk about the super interdisciplinarity of the project. So here we have, well, pretty much every box is a discipline, and some are even divided into sub-disciplines. So we didn't just have history, but we also had art history. So we have computer vision, which analyzes, building tools to analyze references to smells and paintings. The NLP group, and that was actually also distributed. So the Italian colleagues were working on Italian, the French colleagues on French, the Slovenian colleagues on Slovene, we were working on the Dutch, to really create these two were creating input for a knowledge graph, and a knowledge graph is a database for, in the simplest form, but it's a semantic web database. So it's not tables and columns, but it's rather a network, a graph of different kinds of information. And that is really the domain of semantic web research. So it's basically, how do you put smell in a database? And I'll talk more about each of these. And then that resource we created by analyzing loads of text and loads of images, that was then used by historians to create historical narratives, as well as, and also they created input for that. So really helping guide the design of this. Olfactory heritage science, actually at UCL, analyzing the molecular structure of smells, for example, as well as impact. So when we put it in museums, doing these questionnaires, etc. And I will go through these different ones in the course of my presentation. And really, interdisciplinary is a two-way street. And actually in Europa, it's a multi-way street with all these different disciplines interacting. And you can't expect from a historian to really understand all the nitty-gritty details of computer vision or of natural language processing. You also can't expect the computer vision expert to understand the nitty-gritty details of olfactory heritage science. But you do need to know enough about your respective fields to be able to talk to each other. And that is something that we put a lot of time and effort into in the project. So to really have that conversation, to check and double check, are we talking about the same thing? Do we really, is this really what you mean? We use a lot of whiteboards like the one I have here, but also very much the first 9 months of the project were online due to the pandemic. And really my experience, and Europa was no exception in this, is that the best interdisciplinary research projects, they have research questions from the different disciplines. If it's just driven by humanities, or if it's just driven by computer science, or just driven, you can't lift each other up as much as you can when you really treat each other as equals, and both have interesting things you want to take away from this project. So basically how we went about it, so I'll go through the steps of what we did in each of these different parts of the project. Is we first started with creating a taxonomy, and look at what are the core concepts that we want to treat in this section of the project. So very often that was, this is what it looks like. So you've got the historian goes like, yeah, these are really interesting concepts. And then the computer scientists come back with, okay, so we try to organize these in a taxonomy, and we refine that, go back to the historian. Is this really what you mean? And then, there's a few changes maybe. So you go do another cycle, and then you can start the process of, for example, annotating data. What it really looks like is this. So yeah, you can't just say there's, we do 1 or 2 cycles and that's it. It's a continuous conversation. So also in the project, we did 2 versions of the data set. It's never finished. Also, if we look back at it now, we go like, yeah, we could have done certain things differently. But in the end, it was a lot of fun. Yes, it was messy. This was actually in October 2021, the first time we actually managed to get together after writing the proposal. And what we managed to do here, you see Matthias, who's sitting there at the laptop. He's a computer vision PhD candidate. And he managed to teach the historians basically within a day how to create annotations for computer vision. So how do you create a data set for computer vision? And this is something, we do this via Zoom as well, but it's just easier when you've sat together in a room and also maybe had a beer together. So basically what we wanted to do in this work package, in this task, is the goal is to develop machine learning models that can detect smell objects, as you see in the picture here. So the challenges were coming up with the core concept. So that is what my previous slides were about. So how do we know what we even want to recognize? Because basically everything in this image potentially is smelly, but you can't annotate everything. I mean, we also only had 3 years, and that would just actually, be way too much. So what are the really interesting things that we want to look at? And then a lot of computer vision techniques are developed for contemporary digital born images. So, and this research group at Friedrich-Alexander-Universität in Germany, they are actually specialized in art historical images. So basically what we did is that taxonomy of smelly objects, a benchmark data set, and this data set is also used to fine-tune computer vision algorithms. This was also run as a challenge at one of the core computer vision conferences. We have models to do this, and 43,000 images were processed and are available through the knowledge graph. And I'll show you how you can access it, because it's actually openly available. So there were quite a few categories, but the super categories are flower, fruit, vegetable, mammal, drinking vessel, smoke and equipment, smoke related. And then there was other. And each of these had subclasses as well. So for flowers, you also have rose and tulip and hyacinth, daffodil. And then also the number of instances is what our amazing team did in creating these by hand. So basically they would go through for months and months, go through an image and basically create boxes around an object. So this is what it looks like. We use the CVAT tool, which is a computer vision annotation tool. You see on the right-hand side the kinds of objects. And it actually also helps you. So you don't have to start from scratch if you've done a few. You can add a label and you can fix it. So here it says bird, and it's not dead in this case, which is nice. Then what the team did, and this is something that I didn't do, this is really the team in Germany, they compared different algorithms to see how they were doing. It's maybe a bit hard to see, but you see on the orange side, that's the ground truth. So that was done by a human annotator. There's that blue flower at the just sort of in the middle on the left-hand side. That is a dahlia. And then the Dino model in image B thinks it can only recognize flower. So it still gets half the points, but it didn't get the subcategory. So it did get the super category, like I know it's a flower, but I don't quite know what kind of flower it is. So you can pit against each other different algorithms that you score via a method called average precision, where you have to also take into account how much of the box overlaps. So if you look at those flowers here, did it get like the full image of the flower? Did it only get like the center of the flower? So that makes it kind of complicated in really saying, well, it got it, yes or no. But that's all part of some of these metrics that these tools use. And then you can also do precision at 50%, at 70% of the overlap between the bounding boxes. They also see that certain categories are easier than others. For example, teapots do pretty well, and lizards, even especially lizards. We don't have a lot of examples of lizards, but apparently they are specific enough for the algorithms to detect them quite well, as opposed to flowers. And I think, we have 30 subcategories of flowers. So heliotrope and hyacinths, they actually kind of a lot of them look fairly similar. So, even if you have more examples, it gets really confused on that. In the paper that is listed here, they also show how it does on, like, it didn't get the category right, but it got the super category right. So that's already a win. And the paper has lots of images in it, so that also makes it a fun read. For reading smell, we kind of did a similar thing in a way. And here what we wanted to do was develop language technology to identify where in the text do they talk about smell and how do they talk about it. Now the challenge here is that text, so where the images, pretty much everything can smell, the texts are the opposite. So there's not a lot of mention of smell in texts. And also language change. So I guess that's sort of the mirror of contemporary versus art historical images. Here we have also a lot of language technology developed for contemporary language, but we also have spelling variations, also OCR errors that can hamper what we're doing there. And also a lot of this was developed before ChatGPT and all the big language models came out. So probably if we were to do it now, we might also try a few of those different things. But this is what we did. And also what you see here in the image is a screenshot of Inception, which is a very, very popular annotation tool. I have not been able to find out what Inception stands for. If anyone knows it, basically it's similar. You can click on a word, and then you can actually tag the word and say there is a smell word here, there is a source here, or there is a person doing the smelling, and you can also connect two words and have relationships between them. So what we did here, we have annotation guidelines. So how do you go about this? We have a benchmark data set for English, Italian, French, Dutch, German, Slovene, and Neo-Latin. We have NLP models for extracting smell references from texts. And we've processed over 62,000 texts in English, Italian, French, Dutch, German, and Slovene. Most of the texts are for English. For the other languages, we didn't have as many texts available. So basically, from the annotation benchmark, so that is also the manual process where, and this is something that we did across different partners. So as I said, the Italian partners did the Italian, everyone did a bit of English. The French partners did some French, did the French and English. German, we also actually did here in the Netherlands, because we do have some German-speaking colleagues. Latin was also done here at the Royal Academy. Slovenia was done by the Slovene partners. Smell word was the most common thing. Sometimes the text just says like, oh, something smells, or it smelled. But sometimes we can also specifically point at what is the thing that is emitting the smell. Is it a nice smell or not? Do I get any emotion attached to it? And sometimes there's a place associated with it, which for people with an NLP background, the place or location is very often, sometimes, but very often not something like Amsterdam or London or York, but something like in the kitchen or in the garden. So your generic named entity recognition for locations doesn't work there. The creator box, we had, this is something some of our annotators at the Royal Academy came up with. It was like, we didn't think of that when we hadn't come across any examples of that when we were developing the annotation guidelines. But then some of our annotators, they said like, yeah, I'm coming across some of these mentions where a person is creating incense or creating a candle. So should we have a create? So that was added later on in the annotation process, which we could not correct for all the languages anymore. It was also not super common, but we still thought it was interesting to include in some of those instances where the annotation process had not been finished yet. We tried different setups for the different languages. You also see that for different languages, for some languages, there's just more language technology available. For example, Slovenian is a very low resource language. So there we chose to do the historical processing via spelling normalization rather than try a historical model that was trained with more older data. We also looked into either single language models or multilingual models. And we did a tenfold cross-validation setup. This is the big table. There's a lot of you can look at this in some of our paper in our paper. When I share the slides, I'll make sure that the link to the paper is in there as well. What you see is that in a lot of cases, the multilingual model is doing the best. And we think that is, well, not so much for French, but for some of the other languages. So what happens there is that it can actually benefit from the fact that a lot of these languages are related. We also noticed that smell word is the easiest to recognize. Then a lot of the other elements are harder, but overall, we're happy that we can at least, there is something interesting happening here in terms of smell, and even being able to present that to a user is already quite valuable, even if we can't quite fully get the specifics of it. And this is partly also because for a lot of these, we just don't have enough training data, or it's too ambiguous. So, and this is something that I find really important in research, is like, we have extracted all this information, so what do we do with it? And that is really where this knowledge graph comes in. So that is where we try to come up with a model, or a data model, to figure out, so all this information about smell, how do you put that in a database? What is smell even? And you can get quite philosophical about this, and philosophers have, since the time of Aristotle, been trying to organize the world. And basically what it boiled down to for us is that, okay, smell is something that is generated by some action or event. It can also be perceived, which is another action or an event. It can change, that's also an action or an event. Really, because it's not something tangible. I mean, it has molecules, but it's not something that for the majority of the text is or sources, the text and the paintings. It's not about that. It's about, people expressing in a text that they are traveling somewhere and this new smellscape opened up, and that really brought a new vision on something, or smelling a particular thing brought back all these memories. So what we did here is basically, we'll think about what is the most intangible way we can do this. And then there's, for example, for the olfactory experience, there is a person involved who, or an actor is involved, which could be a person or an animal or a group, which is the blue and the yellow that you see here. The different colors are also to express that the different color rectangles are that we borrowed or reused existing ontology. So the blue is coming from the CITOC CRM model, which is quite well known in the galleries, libraries, archives, and museums world for modeling collections. OD, in front of the green ones, is Ojuropa. Purple is CRM Sci for scientific publication. So we really tried to do this as much as we could by reusing and then adding where there was no concept that we could borrow from another ontology. And basically what this led to was this big database that you can access in various ways. The most accessible way is through the Explorer, which you can find via explorer.europa.eu. It's still up, and you can browse through smells. You can also search for smells. If you take your mouse and you can go over, you can select in that timeline there, and then actually the selection changes. And you show at the you see at the bottom here that the results from the texts. So we have 752 occurrences of a glove smell being mentioned in the text that we've processed, and these could be in any kind of language. So we also try to map the concepts that we have across different languages. It happens that the examples you see here are all in English. We also have 932 images in which the computer vision models thought they recognized a glove. And you can also create a profile where you can save interesting smell items. If you click on any of these cards at the bottom, then you can also go to the entire resource, because we're not allowed to republish these resources, but there's a link to the library where we got the text from. There are other ways of accessing. So if you're computationally inclined, the code to our software is on GitHub. That's the link all the way at the top. If you're semi-computational, or you want to try your hand at it, we have what we call nosebooks. So they are Jupyter notebooks. It is part code, and you can change a few things yourself and process some texts. And there's also the data that can be queried through Sparkle, which is the semantic web query language. You can also download the data and play with it yourself. So these are, in a way, ways of bringing these to other researchers. But another really important part of this project was to bring it to the general public and to different kinds of audiences as well. And that's really also where all this technology under the bonnet comes in handy, and all these resources is kind of, in a way, this search engine that we've created for these different modalities. So here's the book by Will Tullett, Smells in the Past, by Bloomsbury, published by Bloomsbury. It's open access. So that's one way where a lot of this knowledge is put together and interpreted and processed. We've also created an encyclopedia of smell history and heritage, where Europa members, as well as other researchers that we've invited, have created entries, so interpreted little vignettes, if you will, encyclopedia entries about historically or heritage-wise interesting or relevant smells, as well as storylines. So some of these entries are linked up in storylines. This is a view of the different storylines. You can click on it and then you get the storyline. So this is, for example, one of the drafts. And this is then what it looks like in an actual storyline. So you got the purple and the green. You click on that and you click through, and behind the scenes there's an interconnectedness. It's not just linear, so you can actually go through the storylines in different orders depending on what you click on each page. So that's something we're experimenting with, a different way of storytelling, because of course a book is very much this, well, unless you just go through it from different chapters and different pages, it's rather sequential. But this online format allows you to also tell stories in a different way and interconnect stories in different ways. Then we also worked with various museums, in particular with Museum Ulm, to create smell-enhanced exhibitions. So what we did there, basically the way of working, we worked with this museum. Also, this was during the pandemic. So the first part of the work was, instead of us going there as planned, was the museum staff with an iPhone on Zoom going through the exhibition, going through their archive or the depots, saying, would this be an interesting object to include? Because you also don't want to have a smell with every object, because that becomes very, very tiring, but also complex. And then with a certain set of objects from their collection, we went looking for historical recipes connected to smells in the resources that we have. And we created perfume briefs for perfume creators. And we also refined the scents with the smell creators. And this is one of the examples that we used. So this is a 16th century portrait. And so that was the first instance. So what happened then in the heritage scent design brief? There is a little bit about the project. Then the next few pages are also about the object that we've chosen, a recipe that we found that would be could potentially be used in that time period to create smells associated with some of the objects in this painting. And then we, with that, the perfumers went to work. You may not have heard of International Flavors and Fragrances, but you've probably used that project. So they generally create scents for washing up liquid, laundry detergent, shampoo. They have a small unit that does custom scents, and we worked with them to do this. And this is very much the process they use, very much like the fancy perfume houses, just on a different scale, an industrial scale. And then for each of the scents, we got 3 different versions. Where for some of the versions, and the person in the picture here is Sophia Erich. She was the Europa event coordinator, olfactory event coordinator. So she knows a lot about organizing cool events and about smells. She's trained as an art historian. So in some of those versions, some of the smell, like this one has a bit more rose than the other, and this one has a bit more horse poo in there. And then it was up to us to smell all of these and pick one. Well, this is the one we would like for the exhibition. This really communicates the kind of message we want to bring in this exhibition. So that's also very much. It's like when you're writing a paper and you're changing the wording, finding a synonym, something like that. So if we look at this painting, do you have any idea what the smell object would be that we wanted to identify here? I guess it's hard to do this online, but I'll highlight it. So he's holding a rosary with a pomander. Yes, someone actually put it in the chat. It's a rosary. You can tell that he was fairly well off, because this is very fancy one. And it contained various items that people thought at the time that if a smell couldn't get to you, then you wouldn't get ill. So the idea was that the miasma theory, that bad smells caused diseases. And we actually found in the archives several recipes for pomanders that people would, put together. So with that, we went to the perfumers. So you see here on the left the historical recipe, which had nutmeg, rosemary, schlag, cloves, rose, lavender, and lemon, and then combine in equal proportions. And you see that the perfumer did put several of those ingredients in there. Some of those would now be, there's no nutmeg in there. And some of those, like civet and ambergris and musk, they are now synthetic for animal welfare. So those are also things to balance. Also, IFF ensured that these would not cause allergic reactions, even though they were developed not to be used on the skin, but to smell via other ways to put them on an object or to have in the air. But so those are also things that they took into account when restructuring or reconstructing some of these, reinterpreting these recipes. What we also did is we managed to, yes, the fur hat could also have a smell. So this is also something that we had to make a choice. So what you could do is create a smellscape of like the entire painting. And this is something we've done for a few other paintings. But here we decided to focus on one object and to highlight that, and to also tell the story of a pomander, because that might not be an object that all museum audiences are familiar with. So this is where we chose to really highlight one particular object in the painting. But for different exhibitions, people could make different choices, right? That's also the nice thing about storytelling and putting together these kind of things. So the Osmothèque is a perfume museum in Versailles in France. And we're very, very proud that we've been able to deposit the smells that were created in the project there. So for the next at least 5 years, maybe 10 years, you can go there, and if you want to use, maybe we say you're a museum professional, you want to use any of these, you can also order that. So there's also a deal with IFF that this scent can be recreated. But yeah, we also have metadata available. Not the full recipes. This was definitely something, we want everything to be as open as possible, but that doesn't always work for every industrial partner. So but yeah, at least it's available and it's deposited somewhere. That's not just us. I'm coming to the end of my slides, but I also wanted to talk about that these smells can get pretty close. The project can hit pretty close to home sometimes. So what you see here is the Oost India House, which is where I park my bike. So that's actually, it's not the building I work in, but it's next door. And this is where people in the 17th century went to sign up with the Dutch East India Company, which at one point had a monopoly on spice trade in the Dutch in the East Indies, which is now Indonesia, current day Indonesia. And for a very long time, this was the first multinational, which according to some historians is maybe not entirely true. But it was very influential in the Netherlands and also in Dutch history. And for a very long time, this had a very positive connotation, but it wasn't all that great, as you can also see on Wikipedia. And this is not something that that we want to. This is also something we wanted to take on in Europa. So one of the things we did was we also created a walking tour through Amsterdam, for which we had rub and sniff cards. You see an image there as well. And with that, a mobile phone app. So you could walk around. It was about 1.5 kilometers and smell various things. And during those stops, you would also get some information about that. And this is also really where you see that the historians play such an important role in creating an app because, you know, they really provide the right links to the information and the narratives. So with that, I've come to the end of my formal presentation, but I'll be around for questions. We really enjoyed the interdisciplinary aspect of this. I've learned so much stuff that I'd never thought about before. And the nice thing about working with old data is that there's no GDPR issues, no copyright issues to a certain extent. So that's also why our data also only runs up to the 1920s. And these are really challenging problems for technology. The big tech companies would like you to believe that it's all solved, but it's not. So every day we are still working on improving these tools for crazy handwritten archives. And they really bring about real world applications. About an hour ago, I found out that we're going to be presenting at DH Benelux Amsterdam in June on which is a little project I did with a computational literary studies literary scholar on the smells of fan fiction, specifically Greek mythology fan fiction and what the people think it smells like. So we just basically took the Europa NLP tools and applied them to that. And also the European Union has a spot at the expo in Osaka in Japan, and they've also selected our project to be present there. We're not going to be there all the time, but at least there's something. So if you are in Japan, then you can also learn more about Europa. This really was a team effort. So I'm here presenting the work of all these amazing people. Yeah, so really, if you have more questions, I can also direct you to the right person for each of the different tasks. This was us being very tired after the final big event that we did. So thank you for your attention, and love to hear your thoughts and questions.
Well, thank you so much. This was really appreciated and really inspirational. It's absolutely incredible, really fun research. And I love the fan fiction thing there at the end. I think there will be questions, but I wanted to selfishly start with my own question. What does a lizard smell like?
That is a very good question. I do not know specifically what a lizard smells like. I do know that we did find one. Maybe it says on here. No, I don't have it on here. So we have these mugs as well with smell wheels. So at some point we found a source that said that unicorns smelled of cinnamon, but it turns out not to be true. Also because unicorns don't exist.
Oh, well, nobody's perfect.
No, I would have to double check with the historians on why they thought this was an interesting item to add. Oh, depends on what aftershave it uses. Oh, thanks.
Great. I think there was already a question in the chat that says, have you been able to identify pheromones and use them as tools in exhibitions and for asset interpretations?
This is something that we were not looking into, although we did write a book in Dutch where we also had a chapter of a Dutch biologist who was really focusing on pheromones. So there's always things that you can do. So there's much more to do on smell, and it would be very interesting to get additional funding or for someone else to do it, to bring in that aspect as well. And it would be very interesting for us as well to see if the model that we created holds up. So if that can also be extended to that kind of information. We hope it does, but it would be great to put that to the test.
Great. It looks like Richard has another question. Have you tried the same for images of historical buildings and archaeological sites?
Oh, For the buildings, there might be some pictures of buildings in our data set. I do know that we looked at smoke coming out of chimneys, whether there was smoke at all. We did not look at archaeological sites, although there was I should have put that in the slides. Last week there was an article in The Guardian that also cited work in which Cecilia Bembibre and other colleagues, Cecilia was also part of the project, have smelled mummies, so Egyptian mummies. So I know, I forgot her name. There is a colleague who is very much looking into analyzing smells from archaeological objects. And I can look up her name and give it to you later. Sorry. And we indeed only used open repositories for images and text.
Great. Any questions? Oh, more Perea.
Yeah, no, we just at some point had to say no to ourselves and be very strict about that. Also, partly for the annotations, we hired student assistants temporarily. Well, it depends. Some we did some annotations ourselves, but we strengthened the team with temporary forces, and we did at some point rehire some people a bit longer. But at some point, we also just had to say, like, look, we only have 3 years. If we want to get this done at all, and the EU is very, very strict on these things as well, then we just need to stop now. But of course, the work is never, ever done.
Lucy has a great question here about how long is the portal up? You know, as somebody else who has a lot of digital skeletons in my closet, I have the same question.
Yeah, we would love to also work with Wikidata and maybe extend it to that or export it to there. In the project proposal, we, as always, promise at least 5 years after until at the end of the project. We had a little thing where the notebooks were down last week, but we put those back up. Yeah, so if you want to work on that with us and Wikidata, then please get in touch. And yeah, we'd love to do a project for flavor. So actually, there was a PhD candidate on the project called Teresa Pacozzi, who's now a postdoc on my team. So she was in the Italian team. She wrote a PhD thesis on olfactory and gustatory language. So her thesis will be published soon, I guess. But yeah, you can also find, I'll put her name in the chat, so you can also find her publications.
Any other question? Oh, one from Peter.
I was just thinking, the question about flavor, it made me think, of course, about other senses. Oh, yeah, sorry. Coming in shot. I wonder how hard it would be, I mean, probably very hard, to translate this to sound and then have that connect to some sort of AI sound generation system where you could have both the tagging and the production of the sound all in sort of one giant chain.
Well, there are people in this call who can probably answer that better than I can, because they're part of the Hearing the Past team, which is a new project that has started just in Antwerp and Ghent. Do you want to maybe take the floor?
Yeah, but I can go.
Sorry, I need to click the sound. Yes, we just started an e-project in University of Antwerp with the FWO funding to exactly repeat what Marieke and her colleagues done for smell. This time with the reconstruction effort for sounds with virtual acoustic simulation softwares. We will try to do the same process for textual analysis to try to gather information from a couple of sources. And with that, we will write some scenarios to be reconstructed, first we will record some sound sources in laboratories, then we will simulate them with the help of softwares. In short, it's such a project we are putting our effort. We have just begun.
Excellent.
And Marieke is one of our advisors. Thanks for her help already. Hi.
So I think maybe for a future seminar,
I was just about to say, you'll have to come back and show us. That would be great.
Okay, Lucy has another question. Were there smells that were missing? What were the biases that produced gaps?
so I think the majority of the smells, it was people complaining. So it was either very, very strong disgust, or it was really amazing, but not the smells in between, the normal stuff. We don't talk about that. And then, well, of course, we also had to make a selection based on the available data. What we tried to do is, and I can tell more about the text because I was involved in that, is we took different genres. So we had some literary text, but also some court documents or legal texts, religious texts, travel logs, medicinal books, household books, botanical texts, and each of these has their own idiosyncrasies in a way. But so, and also then what you see there is other types of biases or racist views, like in the travel logs, people talk very, very negatively about other people from, the places they are visiting. So I'm still trying to find either time or a student to really go through all this text that we've generated, all the data that we've generated, and really do an in-depth analysis of that. Or if someone else here wants to do that, because it's all available, then please do, and tell us what you find.
Yeah, I think we might have time for one more question. Anyone else want to add a last question? Or we can just let you go. Thank you so very much. It was really, really fun. And I am expecting an email back about what a lizard smells like, but it's fascinating to have you. Thank you so much for speaking.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully we'll see you again soon.